let's be honest, none of us are quite ready for the next disaster that might be around the corner. At any point, we will be soon probably in a situation where we are overwhelmed. Our guest, Richard Bryan, became the CEO of a failing family business at 28 years of age. He inherited a business that was losing $3.5 million a year, and he turned it around. Richard is now a coach to CEOs and leaders, helping them build out succession plans, prepare for disasters, and make sure that they know what's going to be around the corner. And at a minimum, they have the team that will help them weather the storm. Richard Bryan, welcome to How I Turned the Corner.
Thank you, Kendra. Very nice to be here.
So let's talk about those early days. So we know what the key was to turning around the business. It was getting the right people on the team, right? What were some of the earlier things that you learned along the way that led you to that place?
Well, I think when I joined the business, it was pretty obvious that we needed change because we were about 6 months from running out of cash. So we had huge losses, huge bank overdraft, and a lot of people who were, I would say, entitled because they'd been in a position for a long time rather than focused on sort of customer satisfaction, customer service. So it was clear there needed to be some change. But I think at 28, I realized that I didn't have the experience and, quite honestly, the credibility with our bank and our manufacturer partners to sort of lead that change. So I was smart enough to go and find someone who could help me. And although I was employing this guy who was a man named Frank, he actually became my mentor. He was in his late 50s and had led several turnarounds before. And with his help, we managed to get things back on track. But yes, it was all about the people and the finances, quite honestly. Those were the two main things.
Well, and as I understand it, this was a family business, had been in your family for multiple generations, your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your father, and now here you are, the fourth generation. I can't even imagine how stressful that must have been, kind of cleaning house with family.
Yeah, it was. We had 16 shareholders who were all related, which was fun. But I was the only one who was actually active in the business. The others were all passive shareholders. So in a way, that made it a little easier, but it was difficult because when you've got people that have worked for you for a long time, it's tough when you're having to change things and you're having to change things to survive. So it was a culture change, really, which was uncomfortable for some people, but it needed to be done.
Mm-hmm. So what were some of the things that what were some of the guardrails that you had in place to help you make those decisions?
Well, I think I was lucky that I had Frank's experience, right? This wasn't his first time around. And so he described me as having paralysis by analysis when he met me. Like I knew how much money we were losing, but I didn't know quite what to do about it. So I was like a deer in the headlights, really. And he helped me just to prioritize and, not tick things off one at a time and actually make decisions, implement those decisions and get the business moving forwards. And a lot of it was around getting the right people in the right places. It sounds a bit cliched, but it really was that simple in terms of some lateral moves, some people leaving the company, but bringing in some fresh talent as well and fresh blood, because a lot of the people that were there at a senior level, and I'm talking like CFO and CEO who I replaced, they had just got used to failure, quite honestly. They were just used to seeing poor results and had almost just resigned themselves to it. So that was the biggest thing, was saying, look, we're not going to accept this, but we have to start getting better customer satisfaction. And if we're going to do that, quite honestly, we need to start by getting better employee satisfaction, because morale was pretty low.
Yeah, definitely. So along those lines, then you were in a spot where you were starting to see this, and making these changes, did you make them all very fast? Was it somewhat slow? What was the process?
So I often get asked, if you hadn't bought Frank in, do you think you would have survived? And my answer to that is probably no, not because I didn't understand the business, but because I wasn't really making decisions quickly enough. And when Frank came in, we picked up the pace. So we had a lot of change pretty quickly. And once we got our team in place, our senior team, then we were able to sort of cascade down some positive messages and focus on the future rather than worrying about what happened in the last couple of years. And I think that was absolutely key. And we did that by we had 360 employees at 6 locations at this time. And so we got them together in small groups of 20. We showed them the numbers, which is something that had never happened before in a privately owned family business. That was a closely guarded secret. So we showed them the numbers so they understood the context of the decisions we were making, because the numbers were terrible. We explained the numbers. We answered lots of questions. And we were just very transparent about the predicament we were in, because yes, we did lose a few people by doing that. But actually, if they weren't up for the fight, we didn't want them to stay. And so I think that was really a smart move that we did that, because then we had everyone at least on the same page.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting you just went through all that, because we on my team, we just went through a change management course to be a little bit better with bringing more deliberate change management into the work we do. And everything you just said is exactly what's recommended. And so I want to highlight it for our listeners, because not everyone has got the just deep insight like you have, but you connected with their heart and their mind. So you said to them, like, we want to make this work. We want to continue to employ people, pay your paycheck, basically. And here are the numbers. That was the mind piece. And when you did that, what you do actually physically is you're actually helping get them bought in. And then you celebrated small wins. You did it in a small group way. You were transparent. All those are the tenements of good change management. So nice job.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I had Frank to help me, but
Yeah.
I was on actually taking the questions. And, some of them were tough questions, but I think all you can do is be transparent. And my experience of not just in my own family business turnaround, because I was there for 15 years, 10 years as CEO, but also working with clients now as a speaker, but also as a coach, is that the more open book you can be, the better in privately held and particularly family businesses, which are not famous for being open about things. Then, it creates, if you want to create trust, I think you have to be open. And as I tell my clients, if you're not open and you keep, for example, the financials a closely guarded secret, people will always assume that you're either doing better, far better than you think, or far worse. And so it's better to just be honest with them, to be honest, and just, you get far more buy-in if you do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the, McKinsey just dropped their latest study on what caused people to leave their job in the last quarter. I keep my eyes on this report every quarter. And the latest one is one of the new things that's on the list is an open and honest leader, or the lack of an open and honest leader was one of the reasons that they left. And when you look at the trends of what we see all the way from government down to business, like, people are now so aware of like what's fair and what's right. And they don't want to be around people who are not doing the fair and right thing. And that a lot of leaders, it's going to start to really hit them if they're not open and transparent. And again, probably not survive this people revolution, not be able to continue to have people on their team if they're not more open and transparent.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know it can be scary, but I think once you start sharing numbers and information on a more open basis with your team, then it just becomes the norm, and I think it's very healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's only scary if there's something in there that you're afraid of being called out on.
Yeah.
So, well, now let's fast forward to now. So you now work with CEOs and help with all, succession planning. And I think family businesses are notorious for not having any kind of successor. It's like, maybe just handing a business down to someone who didn't maybe even want it, right? And so can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in that world right now of succession planning with leaders?
Yeah, so I work with CEOs and their leadership teams. So although the CEO is typically my client, it's the leadership team that I'm working with because I want to make sure that they have a cohesive team. And that's sort of the starting point, is a cohesive team of A players, because I know that if you can get that at the top of the business, then you can really get things moving and grow at a faster rate. And that's a sort of win for everyone. But I think I'm seeing, particularly with some of my family business clients, that they are actually well aware, because of the baby boomers retiring, that they really do need to plan further ahead. It's no good to just have an annual budget and think your planning is done. You need to think 3 to 5 years ahead. So I always recommend having a 3-year rolling forecast financially, but also to think about where you want the business to be in 5 years' time. Now, whether that's you want to be retired in 5 years' time and you're growing a business you can sell, or whether that's a sale to the leadership team, or if you're passing it on to the next generation of family leadership. In any of those scenarios, if you give yourself a longer runway in terms of planning, you've got more options and better options, because a gradual transition is always the best way forwards. It's less of a shock to the business, and quite honestly, it's less of a shock to the successor.
Well, and you'll get more money. I mean, when you go to value a business, there's going to be more money, and the business is going to be valued higher because there is that plan, and potentially you've even figured out the cash situation by then, so it's really highly valued. So, yeah.
Well, I think the worst case scenario is when you've got a leader where it all revolves around them, because not only does that inhibit growth, because you can only grow at the pace of their personal capacity, but you are really not in the best position if you come to sell that business, because the acquiring business will look at it and think, well, everything revolves around this person. Without them, we don't have a business. And I think that's particularly the case with sort of smaller businesses, is you've got a CEO or a founding CEO who is very dominant in terms of decision making, and that's just not healthy if you want to have either pass it on to the next generation or sell for the best price.
Mm-hmm. And so you also do some work around kind of dealing with disasters and messes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I do. I do help leadership teams and business owners with some turnaround strategies as well. And obviously, having lived through it, that's helpful. But I think we all obviously lived through the pandemic, where we all had to adjust. And some businesses actually did very well during the pandemic, so it wasn't all a disaster. But I think it's just understanding if your sales have dropped or you're suddenly into a loss-making situation. It's understanding what to do, first of all, to survive, which is normally around having enough cash. And secondly, to make sure that you keep the people that are key to your survival and your growth after the sort of challenge the storm has passed. Because, if you have to downsize at all, you want to make sure that you are keeping those people that would be very difficult to replace, your sort of A players.
Mm-hmm. So how do you help CEOs now get a little bit more clarity around this? You were saying before we started the recording that you're working with a CEO right now who's really driving results, and it's affecting the people. People are turning over. How do you recommend our CEO balances this?
So we actually have a 3-stage process, which is we do some strategic planning to start with, which is about forget what we're doing now. Let's think about the future and create a vision for our ideal future. Where do you want to be in 3 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And then we work backwards from that. And We do some financial forecasting, but I think most important actually, and the bit that I find they're less used to, or yes, less comfortable with, is starting out with, look, what's your core purpose? Why are you in business to start with? And what are your core values as a business? Because if you can be crystal clear on that, then you can actually look at your team, either the existing team, but more importantly, the people you want to join going forwards, and make sure that they're actually aligned with that. Because if they're not aligned to your core purpose and your core values, the chances are you're going to turn them over. And as we were talking about before we start the recording, there's a serious cost to that. If you've got high turnover, I think it's pretty difficult to measure accurately, but it's a lot, right? There's lots of surveys that talk about the cost of turnover in any business. When I joined the family business in our sales department, we had 30% annual turnover. So that was not good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I did do the numbers on this not too long ago because, there's all the stats, but I think a lot of times people are a little dubious of these statistics. Right. And so I just looked at my own P&L and did the math around a bad hire I had many years ago. But just assuming $100,000 a year employee that I was onboarding, which onboarding, nobody's effective for at least a few months until, before they really, pardon?
3 to 6 months.
Yeah. So let's just say conservatively, 3 months. That's $25,000 at $100,000 a year. Right. And then I ended up letting her go 3 months and 7 days into employment. And so I also had her taxes and her benefits I was paying for. I had to buy her a chair. Should have been a sign, right? I had all the churn on the team. I mean, if 1 hour a month per employee was spent churning, which we know was more, that's like another $20,000. Like the math is horrible. So one bad employee probably cost me at a minimum $64,000. That was my math. And that to me, I mean, I can totally resonate with that math. And so, in SHRM, some of the studies that are out there are saying it's about, that would be the middle point, the 64,000. So yeah, nobody talks about how expensive this turnover is. And so we get into talking about like we talk about the cost of a customer acquisition. Well, there's a cost of an employee acquisition. Like there's an ROI on employees. Every business is different. A coffee shop might have an ROI of 9 months, right? Where you have a barista for 9 months. That might be great. You get enough out of them in that time. A business like mine, it's 3 or 4 years probably. If I'm losing anyone in less than that amount of time, that's so expensive.
Well, and you think in my old business that, people were typically buying a new car every 3 years.
Yeah.
And so if every time they walked into the showroom, there were all different faces, they didn't recognize anyone, it didn't exactly make them feel comfortable. And so that turnover was particularly harmful in terms of customer experience, customer loyalty, customer satisfaction. And I think whatever business you're in, if you've got a lot of turnover, then it's affecting your client retention as well, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Really good point. So now let's switch gears just a little bit and chat about kind of what you're seeing. So, you and I being consultants in the world, I think we get more of a bird's eye view on things that are coming because we're working with and in a lot of businesses, different industries, different parts of the country. And I don't know if you experience this or not, but I start to see patterns and trends to the point where I can start predicting what's going to happen, a year or two out on some things. I predicted this people revolution back in 2015. So, just because of what I was seeing, right? And so what are you noticing right now?
Well, obviously, anyone who's connected to real estate, whether that's commercial or residential, has seen a tough time recently. The market's changed with interest rates going up. So that's been challenging. I also think businesses that were borrowing a lot of money have seen a big difference because, they were borrowing at very, very historically low interest rates. And now they've suddenly got a much bigger burden to cover there. So that's definitely impacted confidence in terms of investment, not just in building and real estate, but in investing in the business, the infrastructure of the business. But I'm pretty optimistic that small to medium size businesses in the United States in particular are pretty robust. And I'm pretty confident that they'll bounce back strongly. And a lot of the people I know from groups like Vistage and Entrepreneurs Organization, yes, they've found the interest rates challenging if they're borrowing money, but they're finding ways around it, and they're being creative, and they're focusing more on their people, right? They're focusing on understanding that the old cliche about your business is your people is true, and holding on to the really good people is more key now than ever, I think.
I think that's a perfect spot to end. So yes, thank you so much, Richard. People, it always comes down to the people, which of course, anyone who's listening to this podcast knows that I'm going to say that, but it's true. Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on How I Turned the Corner.
Thank you.